time I'd been asked, thank you TCM, for raising my profile enough that Sight and Sound magazine finally asked me to contribute my list of the greatest films ever made. It was very interesting to note, I'm obviously, you know what I'm going to say, The Wild Bunch is on that list of the 10 greatest movies ever made. And it was on Sight and Sound's list of the 100 greatest films ever until this last one, and it fell out of the top 100 for reasons that I will discuss momentarily. This is, in my estimation, the greatest Western ever made. Not only, yeah, I'm going to give it a moment there. Yeah. The greatest Western ever made. This is not Rio Bravo, which is a great film. But if you were at the screening last night, you are now going to see the anti-Rio Bravo. That's essentially what's happening here. When I was growing up and starting to really get into movies in the early 70s, I'm not going to say the late 60s because I was still really just a kid then, but I started to actually think and be impressed by cinema. And at that point, Sam Peckinpah was without question the most controversial director in the world. It was all based on the film that you are about to see. I think I can almost see you, so I just want to ask how many people in the audience, raise your hands, have not seen The Wild Bunch before? So the rest of you are oohing and eyeing know what these people are getting themselves into. Okay. This film, when it came out, it is a beautiful transitional movie between old Hollywood and new Hollywood. What Sam Peckinpah does in this movie literally revolutionized cinema. And he did it as an elegy to the Old West. He had done that before in a fabulous movie called Ride the High Country. Did very much the same thing you're going to see here. He gets Joel McRae and Randolph Scott to be very, very aware of their status as legends in show business and carrying that weight of representing the death of the Old West. And it pays, I think, to understand a little bit about who Sam Peckinpah was. He came from Fresno, California. He was born in Fresno in 1925 to a ranching family, and a family that was also involved in politics. His father was a judge. They were Old West guys, and this is what Peckinpah grew up in. But he was the kid who went off to college, and he went to USC and studied drama, and he had his entire purpose in life, seriously, was to make this film. Because this is his testimony. This is what he felt and lived his whole life, was this transitional thing between the old American West and the encroaching industrialized world and the geopolitics of a changing world. And he finally got his chance to do it. When it came out of the blue, because Ride the High Country was just a small little film. Sam had worked in the 50s as a dialogue director and as a writer. He created the Rifleman TV series. He did a great series with Brian Keith called The Westerner. And then he made Ride the High Country. And then feeling his oats, he got to make a picture called Major Dundee with Charlton Heston that was a colossal disaster. And he earned a reputation as a very, very, he was like the he was the Eric von Stroheim of Westerns. You know, it's like, just don't let this guy near our money because he's going to spend it all and it's all, you know. So, but he also could inspire intense loyalty in a crew. So it was amazing that he actually got to make another movie after Major Dundee. So I want to just take a moment to recognize the producer of this film, Phil Feldman. Legend, always had it. You know, they had a huge falling out, and Sam always said, Phil Feldman, stab me in the back. He massacred the Wild Bunch, he destroyed it, but I just want to say, for the record, Sam, I'm doing it. Phil Feldman got this movie made. And when Sam Peckinpah went to Mexico for 3 months of shooting on this film, which maybe today doesn't sound like much, but back then, Warner Brothers was saying, what is he doing down there? It's just a Western. No, it was not just a Western. In the 1960s, if you made a movie, the average film had 600 distinct cuts was the average for a movie, right? This movie has over 3,300 specific edits in it. It is the most intensely edited movie up to this time. Okay, Peckinpah shot 3,300 feet of 330,000 feet of film. Phil Feldman, every time Peckinpah said, we need more cameras, we need this, we need that, Phil Feldman got it for him. And he was just isolated in southern Mexico shooting this movie with his loyal band. And it was an extraordinary experience. Jaime Sanchez, who plays a pivotal role in this film, said it became obvious to us after several days on the set that we were going to be asked to go for broke. Like, this was it. And you were dishonoring your colleagues and dishonoring Sam if you gave 1 ounce less than everything you had. Now, that may not seem like much, but Peckinpah had assembled this cast of old Hollywood veterans, and this really was like their last hurrah, which is exactly what the film is about. So the fact that he cast William Holden and Robert Ryan and Ernest Borgnine and Ben Johnson, it was just extraordinary. And there's a wonderful story about when they were first starting to shoot the picture, and the movie opens with, at that point, the greatest gunfight in the history of cinema in the opening of the film. First cut, that scene lasted 21 minutes in the first cut. They got it down to 5 eventually, and it revolutionized everything. But when they were shooting it, Sam spent so much time on detail with the other cast members, the bounty hunters, and L.Q. Jones and Strother Martin, and he was so particular about what he wanted that this was the first time William Holden had met him, and he was sitting next to Sam on the set to observe him and see what kind of a director he was. And after a few hours on the set watching him, Holden disappeared. And Peckinpah said, where'd he go? What the hell happened? And the next day, Holden said, when I saw the way you operate, I went back to the hotel and said, holy hell, I got to study for this guy. Because he thought it was going to be Alvarez Kelly or something that like he had just made. And no, this was an entirely different thing. And in the end, Holden ended up playing a very thinly veiled version of Peckinpah himself. But this, the cinematography in this film is absolutely extraordinary. Lucien Ballard, who had photographed all those wonderful Bud Boetticher westerns in the 1950s, this is in many ways his masterpiece. And to edit the film, Sam chose a very, I'm not going to say inexperienced, but a guy without many credits at that point named Lou Lombardo. And the two of them cut this film in Mexico for the first cut. It was 5 hours long. They managed to get it down to 2 hours and 45 minutes, and I promise my introduction won't be that long. But what emerged just changed everything. And as you know, this film is legendary for its violence, and there are 3 absolutely extraordinary sequences. You will not have to wait long for the first one. It is the beginning of the movie. The first 15 minutes of this movie are more intense than anybody had ever seen in a movie theater at that time. In the middle of the movie comes the heist of a train that I would put up there with Rafifi as one of the great heist sequences in cinema history. And then at the end, when you are worn out and saddle weary and dusty as hell, you are going to meet the apocalypse at the end of this film.
Wow.
And I will say, I wish I could talk about the ending of this movie, because I could talk for an hour just about the shooting of the climax of this film, which became known to the crew as the Battle of Bloody Porch. It was 2 weeks of shooting, none of it storyboarded.
Wow.
This is Sam Peckinpah painting, where he is literally thinking up the shots on the fly. And this is why I give credit to Phil Feldman, because a lot of producers would have just called it off. But he let Peckinpah have his head and shoot this thing. And all the talk that people have said over the years about the end of this film and how spectacular it is, I will say that what sticks with people and why the end of this film has never been surpassed for the emotional power of the violence in this movie, it is, in my estimation, it really comes down to one person, and that is William Holden. He is extraordinary in this movie. And so when you see movies with massive body counts and all this stuff, William Holden is not in the middle of all those other gun battles that you've seen, but in this one, his performance as Pike Bishop is just so legendary. There's a great moment when Peckinpah, it's a quiet moment, and he saw Holden mount on his horse and ride off, and he said, "My God, that's a lonely back." And it was like, it's true. Holden is spectacular in this movie, and it's hard to believe when you look at him on the screen. He's like 50 years old in this film. He looks like he's 80. And thankfully, he had put a lot of wear and tear on himself by the time Peckinpah cast him, and he was absolutely perfect in this film. So I hope I primed the pump for you. There's a lot more that I can say about this movie, but you know what? I'm going to sum it up in 2 words. Let's go.